YouTube world, short video here discussing the Crosman 1377. Just got my steel breech delivered, so in the middle of taking the gun apart to install the steel breech. Now, one thing I wanted to cover, there's a lot of conversations about extended bolt probes, right? That guy there that pushes the pellet in place into the barrel. There's also a lot of talk about the transfer port, which is that hole right there. That's where your compressed air comes out and gets behind the pellet to push the pellet. There's a lot of talk about the transfer port being blocked by the pellet or the skirt of the pellet. So let's have a look. Here is the new steel breech. This is the underside. This is the side that mounts onto the top there. So what you're looking at is that is the port, the compressed air transfer port. Now that is set up as if the gun is loaded and ready to fire, which means there is a Crosman. Hang on, let me bring one over here. What I've got loaded in there is the hollow point. I should have got one of these out and set it up. There's the pellet. That is the front of the pellet, and that is the skirt of the pellet at the back. So what you're looking at here, the gun is loaded as if it's ready to fire. So the bolt probe at the back, if you look down in the hole, the bolt probe is blocking half the port, and so is the skirt. That silvery colour there on the right of the hole, that is the skirt of the hollow point pellet, blocking half the port. So when you look at that, if you can get a good look at it, the hole is, I'm going to call that like at least 80% blocked by the bolt probe and the skirt of the pellet. But I'm really struggling to believe that the designers and manufacturers of this really cool little gun are more stupid than the rest of us. Now stop and think for a minute. A lot of hours would have gone into the design and development of this. Okay, we're not talking about building a rocket ship. You're talking about a $50 gun. So, they can't put an infinite amount of R&D into it, because then the $50 gun's going to be $150 and they're not going to sell any. However, I don't think it's a really smart idea to assume that all us weekend warriors and home hacks are, tenfold smarter than the people that designed the gun. So here's the question. Is it a case of near enough is good enough? Hey, it's only a $50 gun, it's going to work, that's okay. Or is there more to it? Now, obviously, if you push a certain amount of compressed air at 10 pumps into the cylinder of this thing, I don't know what volume that's going to be. Let's call it 100 cubic centimeters of air squashed into 2 cubic centimeters. I'm just picking a random number here. But if you've got 100 cubic centimeters of air, compressed air, coming out through a smaller hole, you're going to have a nice amount of pressure. If the hole's too small, you're going to lose some of that pressure. If it's too big, you're going to lose that pressure. So obviously there's a sweet spot. Think of it as a garden hose. Okay? If you don't have one of those twisting adjustable nozzles on a garden hose, you're going to call that, let's call that moderate pressure. If the water is coming out of the garden hose without any obstruction at all, we'll call that moderate pressure. You put one of those adjustable nozzles on, if you've got it turned off, you open it just a little bit, you're going to have a a decent amount of pressure but small volume, you're not going to have a lot of water coming out. You open it all the way, or you start opening it, you get to that sweet spot of maximum flow and maximum pressure. You keep turning it, and that pressure falls away to, you might have more volume but less pressure. So obviously, if we go back to the garden hose scenario, you've got that sweet spot of good flow and maximum pressure out of your adjustable nozzle. So really, that's all. That's what we're all trying to find here out of our little 1377s, because there's nothing on TV. This is why we do this. This is why we play with these stupid damn things. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. I can truly understand the concept of machining down the tip of the bolt probe. I can. I understand why guys do it, for sure. Then there's less obstruction. Instead of having that cone shape, you trim it down, hack half the meat away, you're going to get more air behind the pellet. I understand that. It makes perfect sense. I also understand the concept of an extended probe to push the pellet further into the barrel instead of having the skirt blocking half the hole. But once again, what are we doing? Are we screwing up a design? Probably not. I've seen some chronograph tests to say that, yeah, people are picking up a few extra feet per second by making those two modifications, a longer probe to push the pellet into the barrel and also a thinner probe. But did Crosman design it this way so at least some of the air, let me find something to point with here, some of the air is getting behind the head of the pellet? Alright, because if you've got air coming up past the skirt, maybe 20-30% of your compressed air is going to get behind the head of the pellet. So does that 20 or 30% of air load the pellet into the barrel, into the rifling, and then the rest of it gets behind and pushes it out? So out of our 100% of compressed air, are we going to have 30% pushing behind the head and 70% pushing behind the pellet? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But that's about it for me. If anyone actually does watch this video and wants to contribute, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are we going too far? Has Crosman got it right? Did they just say, well, we know it's a bit rough around the edges, but that's all the time and effort we can put into it for a $50 gun? Don't know. What I am going to do, though, is certainly install this steel breech. I'm going to do a separate video about that as to why we do this at all. I used to be in the camp of why are these idiots on YouTube spending hundreds of dollars on a $50 gun? Well, yeah, now I'm at stage one and I understand. I get it. So what do we do? I don't know what I'm going to do. Excuse me. From here on, am I going to replace the transfer port with a little plastic one? I don't know. Am I going to machine the bolt probe down? I don't know. Am I going to buy one that's already machined down and that's got a longer tip on it to push the pellet further into the barrel? I don't know. Because I don't know if this is a sloppy mistake or if this is an intention. But if you do watch this, give me your comments, give me your thoughts. Let me know if there's, let me know what you think. If this is a poor design or that it's there for a reason. Thanks for watching. See ya.